On the morning of October 14, 2019, a maintenance worker at the Pinewood storage facility in Grants Pass, Oregon, discovered Unit 237 standing wide open. The padlock had been removed and placed carefully on the concrete floor outside. Inside, a single folding chair sat in the center of the 10 by 10 space, positioned to face the back wall. On that chair rested a Sony Handycam, its battery dead, its memory card full. The unit had been rented 6 months earlier by Thomas Caldwell, a 34-year-old documentary filmmaker from Portland. Caldwell had paid for a full year in advance, always in cash, and had specified in his rental agreement that under no circumstances should anyone enter the unit, even for routine inspections. The facility manager, Patricia Gomez, would later tell investigators that Caldwell had seemed intense but polite during their interactions, and that he'd visited the unit at odd hours, sometimes arriving after midnight and leaving before dawn. When police reviewed the security footage from the facility, they found something immediately troubling. The cameras showed Caldwell arriving at 11:47 p.m. on October 13th, entering Unit 237, and pulling down the rolling door behind him. The footage continued through the night, covering all 3 angles that captured the unit's exterior. The door never opened again. At 6:23 a.m., roughly 6 hours after Caldwell entered, the door was suddenly standing open, the padlock on the ground. No one had come or gone. The door simply appeared open between one frame and the next, as though several seconds of footage had been surgically removed, except the timestamp showed no gap. Thomas Caldwell was never seen again. The Handycam contained 4 hours and 17 minutes of footage. The first 3 hours showed Caldwell sitting motionless in the chair, staring at the back wall of the storage unit, occasionally checking his watch. He never spoke, never moved except to shift his weight or wipe sweat from his forehead. The timestamp on the video began at 11:52 p.m. on October 13th. At the 3-hour 14-minute mark, something changed. Caldwell stood abruptly, walked directly toward the camera, and switched it off. When it resumed recording 7 minutes later, the only gap in the footage, the chair was empty. The storage unit was exactly as it had been found. Door open, padlock removed, Caldwell gone. The camera had been turned back on remotely or by a timer, or by someone who then managed to leave no trace on the security footage outside. Detective Sarah Moreno of the Grants Pass Police Department was assigned to the case on October 15th. She described her first viewing of the Handycam footage as profoundly unsettling in her initial report. Subject displays no signs of distress or confusion, she wrote. Behavior suggests waiting for a specific time or event. Purpose of recording, unclear. Subject's focus on rear wall of unit suggests anticipation of something appearing or occurring in that location. When forensics examined the storage unit, they found no fingerprints except Caldwell's own. No biological evidence, no signs of forced entry or struggle. The concrete walls and floor revealed nothing unusual under luminal testing. The only item recovered besides the camera was a small notebook wedged between the back wall and the floor, easily missed in initial searches. It contained a single page of writing in Caldwell's handwriting. The note read, "If you're seeing this, I made it through or I didn't come back at all. Either way, don't look for me where I was, look for me where I shouldn't be. Check the recordings from June. I was right about the pattern." Thomas Caldwell's apartment in Portland was searched on October 16th. What investigators found raised more questions than it answered. Caldwell lived alone in a third-floor apartment on Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard. His landlord, Dennis Kowalski, told police that Caldwell had been a model tenant for 3 years, always paid on time, kept to himself. The only strange thing, Kowalski said in his statement, was the aluminum foil on the windows. He put it up about 8 months ago. Said he was developing film and needed complete darkness, but I never smelled the chemicals you'd need for that kind of work. The apartment consisted of a bedroom, bathroom, kitchenette, and living room. The living room had been converted into something between an editing studio and an evidence board. 3 computer monitors sat on a desk against one wall, all password protected. The other walls were covered floor to ceiling with printed photographs, maps of Oregon and Northern California, news clippings, and sticky notes covered in Caldwell's tight, obsessive handwriting. Red yarn connected various elements in a web that seemed to follow some logic known only to Caldwell. The photographs were the first thing that caught Detective Moreno's attention. There were hundreds of them, all seemingly taken in forests, all showing the same basic subject: trees. Not remarkable trees, not particularly beautiful or notable trees, just ordinary Douglas firs, hemlocks, and cedars in what appeared to be various locations throughout the Pacific Northwest. Each photograph had been labeled with GPS coordinates, a date, and a time, all written in Caldwell's hand on the white border below the image. The dates ranged from March 2019 to September 2019, spanning 6 months. But there was something wrong with the photographs. It took the forensics team 3 viewings to identify what Caldwell had been documenting in each image. Somewhere in the frame, usually partially obscured by other trees or brush, was a tree that appeared in multiple photographs despite the varying GPS coordinates. The same distinctive pattern of bark, the same unusual branch configuration, the same tree appearing in forests that were sometimes more than 100 miles apart. Detective Moreno contacted Dr. Raymond Wu, a botanist at Portland State University, to examine the photographs. His assessment, delivered on October 21st, was unequivocal. It's the same tree, not the same species, not a similar tree, the exact same individual organism. The branch scarring, the bark pattern, the overall structure, they're identical. Either these photographs have been digitally manipulated, which our analysis suggests they haven't, or whoever took these pictures has documented something that shouldn't be botanically possible. The maps on Caldwell's wall show the locations where each photograph had been taken, with dates written beside each marked point. The earliest marks were concentrated around the Columbia River Gorge. The locations then spread southward through Oregon, appearing near Crater Lake, then into northern California near the Klamath National Forest. The pattern wasn't random. When the GPS points were connected chronologically, they formed a rough southward trajectory, as though tracking something that was moving or appearing in a sequential pattern. Caldwell's computers were eventually accessed by the department's cyber forensics unit. His browser history revealed months of research into topics that painted a picture of increasing obsession: spontaneous disappearances in national forests, spatial anomalies, timeline inconsistencies, quantum entanglement, documentary filmmaking techniques, and strangely historical accounts of repeated landmarks reported by 19th-century explorers in the Pacific Northwest. His email contained correspondence with several sources. Most were brief exchanges with park rangers, requesting information about unusual reports from hikers or forestry workers. One email chain stood out. It was with someone using the address pattern_witness_03@protonmail.com, dated from May through September 2019. The exchange began with this message from the unknown sender: "I saw your post on the forum. I've been seeing it too. Different tree, same behavior. It follows a schedule. I've mapped 17 appearances. You need to be there at the exact minute it appears. That's when the door is open." Caldwell's response: "How long does the door stay open?" Pattern_witness_03 7 minutes. 7 minutes exactly. After that, you're locked wherever you are. The final email from the anonymous sender, dated September 30th, 2019, 2 weeks before Caldwell's disappearance, read simply: "I'm going through on the next cycle. October 13th, between 2 and 3 a.m., at the location I sent you. If I don't reply after that, you'll know it worked. Don't wait too long after I go." The pattern is accelerating. Caldwell never responded to that email. October 13th was the night he entered the storage unit and vanished. Investigators attempted to trace pattern_witness_03, but the email address had been created using anonymizing software routed through multiple international servers. The user had never logged in again after September 30th. Detective Moreno's team tracked down the coordinates mentioned in the earlier emails. They led to a location in Willamette National Forest, approximately 40 miles southeast of Eugene, Oregon. On October 24th, a search team was sent to investigate. They found nothing unusual, just old-growth forest consistent with the surrounding area. However, one of the search team members, Forest Service employee Marcus Chen, noted something odd in his report. Approximately 30 meters from the coordinates, we found a Douglas fir that seemed out of place. The soil around its base appeared disturbed, as though the tree had been recently planted. But the tree itself was clearly mature, at least 50 to 70 years old based on diameter. The ground showed no signs of mechanical excavation that would be necessary to transplant a tree of that size. Photographs of the tree were compared to those found in Caldwell's apartment. It was a match to one of the recurring trees in his documentation, photographed by Caldwell on June 8, 2019, at a location 43 miles northwest. The investigation into Thomas Caldwell's disappearance officially began on October 15, 2019, but it wasn't until late October, after the contents of his apartment were fully analyzed, that the case attracted serious resources. The Grants Pass Police Department, recognizing they were dealing with something beyond standard missing persons protocols, requested assistance from the Oregon State Police and the FBI's Violent Crimes Against Children program, which sometimes handled unusual adult disappearances in federal lands. FBI Special Agent Laura Hendricks was assigned as lead federal investigator on November 1st. Her background was in pattern crimes and serial abductions, but she would later tell colleagues that the Caldwell case felt like something else entirely, less like a crime and more like a man who planned his own disappearance. With mathematical precision, the investigation proceeded along multiple tracks. The first priority was establishing a timeline of Caldwell's movements in the weeks before his disappearance. Cell phone records showed his last location ping at 11:34 p.m. on October 13th, approximately 15 minutes before he arrived at the storage facility. The phone had pinged off a tower on Interstate 5, near Grants Pass, heading southbound. The phone was never recovered and stopped transmitting after that final ping. Credit card records showed Caldwell had made several purchases in the week before his disappearance. $347 at a camping supply store in Portland for cold weather gear and a high-lumen flashlight. $89 at a bookstore for texts on theoretical physics and spatial geometry. $156 for a week's worth of groceries, all non-perishable items, and a curious $1,200 cash withdrawal from his bank on October 9th. No record existed of what he'd purchased with that cash. Bank statements revealed that Caldwell had been steadily draining his savings account since June. His balance, which had been roughly $34,000 in May 2019, accumulated from documentary work and commercial video projects, had dwindled to $1,847 by October. The withdrawals corresponded with increased spending on travel, gas station receipts, tracking a pattern of trips throughout Oregon and Northern California, matching the locations marked on his apartment maps. Special Agent Hendricks authorized a deeper dive into Caldwell's background. He had grown up in Ashland, Oregon, the only child of Michael and Patricia Caldwell, both deceased, his father from a heart attack in 2011, his mother from cancer in 2015. He'd attended the University of Oregon, graduating in 2009 with a degree in film and media studies. For a decade, he'd worked as a freelance videographer and documentary filmmaker, producing corporate videos and occasional short documentaries about environmental issues and local history. Interviews with friends and colleagues painted a picture of a man who had been stable and reliable until early 2019, when something shifted. David Paulson, a fellow filmmaker who'd collaborated with Caldwell on several projects, told investigators, "Tom called me in March, super excited about a new documentary he was planning. He said he'd stumbled onto something while researching hiking trail disappearances for a project. He wouldn't tell me details, kept saying he needed to verify it first, needed more documentation. After that, he became distant, stopped returning calls. The last time I saw him was in July. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I asked if he was okay, and he just said, 'I'm close, Dave. I'm so close to proving it.'" Proving what he wouldn't say, investigators tracked down the online forum where Caldwell had allegedly encountered pattern_witness_03. It was called Displaced, a fringe community dedicated to discussing anomalies in geographical documentation, people who claim to have seen the same landmark in impossible locations. Hikers reporting trails that appeared and disappeared, forestry workers finding survey markers that predated official surveys by decades. The forum had fewer than 300 active members and existed in a gray zone between serious anomaly research and paranoid conspiracy theorizing. Caldwell's username was Doxica, and he'd made exactly 47 posts between March and September 2019. His first post, dated March 12th, read, "Working on a documentary about trail disappearances in the PNW in the process. I photographed the same tree in 3 different locations over 2 weeks, 40+ miles apart. Has anyone documented anything similar? Looking for serious replies only." The responses ranged from skeptical to intrigued. Several users claimed to have experienced similar phenomena. One user, ForestWalker89, wrote, "I'm a logging surveyor. Last summer, I kept finding the same boulder formation in different parts of Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. Same lichen patterns, same erosion marks. Coordinates showed they were miles apart. I stopped reporting it because my crew thought I was losing my mind." Another user, Quiet Observer, posted, "This isn't new. Indigenous oral histories from the Pacific Northwest contain dozens of stories about landmarks that moved or appeared where they shouldn't be. Most anthropologists dismiss them as metaphorical or mythological, but what if they were literal observations? What if this has been happening longer than we realize?" Caldwell's final post on the forum, dated September 18th, was the longest. "I've now documented the same tree specimen in 23 locations over 6 months. I verified each photograph with GPS logging and cross-referenced with USGS maps. The tree appears on a roughly predictable schedule, approximately every 9 to 12 days, each time slightly further south. I believe these appearances follow a pattern that corresponds to something moving beneath or through our spatial framework. I've made contact with another researcher who has mapped similar phenomena. We believe there is a threshold period, a window of maybe 5 to 10 minutes when the spatial displacement is accessible. I'm planning to test this hypothesis directly. If I'm right, I may be unreachable after October 13th, but not because something happened to me, because I'll be somewhere else, documenting from the other side." The post had received only 3 replies before the forum moderators locked the thread and flagged it as potentially concerning. One reply came from pattern_witness_03. "Check your email." Cybersecurity specialists traced the forum's membership but found that both Caldwell and pattern_witness_03 had used VPNs and anonymizing software. Pattern_witness_03's real identity remained unknown. A forensic linguist analyzed the anonymous sender's writing style and estimated they were likely male, aged 25 to 40, with a background in either academic research or technical writing based on syntax patterns and vocabulary. The analysis provided no actionable leads. By mid-November, Special Agent Hendricks had assembled a working theory that Caldwell had not been the victim of foul play but had, instead, staged his own disappearance, possibly as part of an elaborate hoax or psychological break. This theory fell apart when forensic psychologist Dr. Amanda Reeves reviewed Caldwell's documentation and communications. Her report, filed November 19th, stated, Subject displays none of the typical markers of delusional thinking or psychotic break. His methodology is systematic and empirical. His documentation is meticulous. His communications show clear reasoning and anticipation of skepticism. If this is a hoax, it's one of the most elaborate and internally consistent I've encountered. If it's a psychological break, it's one that somehow maintained logical consistency for at least 7 months. Neither explanation feels adequate. The storage facility itself underwent extensive forensic examination. Luminol testing of Unit 237 showed no blood or biological material. Ground-penetrating radar found no hidden compartments or tunnels. The walls were solid concrete. The single entrance was the roll-up door facing the security camera, unless Caldwell had managed to remove himself from the unit during the 7-minute gap in his recording while somehow avoiding the continuous external security footage. There was no conventional explanation for his disappearance. One detail troubled investigators more than any other. When forensic analysts examined the Handycam's internal data, they found something anomalous. The camera's internal chronometer, separate from the visible timestamp in the video, showed a duration discrepancy. According to the camera's firmware logs, it had been recording for 4 hours and 17 minutes, exactly as the footage showed, but the internal system clock indicated that 9 hours and 42 minutes had elapsed between when the camera was turned on and when it was turned off. More than 5 hours were missing somewhere in the device's timeline, hours that left no gap in the footage but existed in the camera's internal record of time. A Sony technician consulted by the FBI stated, "This shouldn't be possible without physical modification of the device's firmware, which we found no evidence of. It's as though the camera experienced time at one rate while recording events unfolding at another rate. I can't explain it." In December 2019, as the investigation stalled and media attention faded, 2 events reopened and deepened the mystery surrounding Thomas Caldwell's disappearance. The first event occurred on December 8th. A hiker named Gabriela Reyes was trekking through the Umpqua National Forest, approximately 60 miles south of where Caldwell had photographed one of his recurring tree specimens in August. She stopped to rest near a small creek and noticed something unusual. A tree nearby had a piece of bright orange Surveyor S tape tied around its trunk, about 6 feet up. This was uncommon in national forest. Surveyors and researchers often marked trees for various projects, but something about this particular tree struck her as odd. She took a photograph with her phone and later posted it to a Facebook group for Oregon hikers, asking if anyone knew what kind of survey was being conducted in that area. The post caught the attention of Detective Moreno, who had set up alerts for keywords related to unusual tree sightings in Oregon forests. The tree in Reyes's photograph matched one of Caldwell's documented specimens. Same bark pattern, same distinctive branch configuration, same tree. Caldwell had photographed this tree on July 4, 2019, at a location 78 miles northwest. It had apparently moved again, continuing its southern trajectory. Detective Moreno drove to the location on December 10th with a forensics team. The tree was still there, the orange tape still tied around its trunk. The tape itself became a critical piece of evidence. When examined, it was identified as a standard forestry marking tape, but forensic analysis found something unexpected: traces of Caldwell's DNA on the tape's surface. Specifically, skin cells consistent with handling the tape showed weathering consistent with being exposed to elements for at least several months. But the tree hadn't been in this location for months according to GPS tracking. If it followed the pattern Caldwell had documented, it had only appeared here sometime in the past few weeks. It's like he marked this tree months ago, Detective Moreno wrote in her report. But the tree only recently arrived at this location. Either that or the tape somehow traveled with the tree through whatever process is displacing it. Both explanations are equally impossible. The second event was more disturbing. On December 17th, the Forestry Camera, one of dozens of motion-activated wildlife monitoring cameras maintained by the U.S. Forest Service throughout Oregon, captured an image that would become the most widely circulated piece of evidence in the Caldwell case. The camera was positioned in Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest, monitoring a game trail at 2:47 a.m. on December 17th. It was triggered by motion. The photograph it captured showed a section of forest at night, illuminated by the camera's infrared flash. In the center of the frame, partially obscured by tree trunks, was the silhouette of a person. The figure appeared to be male, wearing clothing consistent with what Caldwell had been wearing in the storage unit footage: dark pants, a hooded jacket. The figure was facing away from the camera, standing motionless among the trees, but there was something wrong with the image. The figure appeared slightly translucent, or perhaps the camera had captured motion blur. Though the surrounding trees and foliage were perfectly sharp, more unsettling was what appeared in front of the figure: the outline of what looked like a doorway or a rectangular frame of light, seemingly suspended in mid-air among the trees, with darkness visible beyond it. Forest Service employee James Wu discovered the image during a routine check of the camera's memory card on December 20th. He immediately flagged it as unusual and forwarded it to his supervisor, who contacted authorities. By December 22nd, the image was in FBI custody. Forensic analysis determined the image had not been digitally manipulated. The camera's internal logs confirmed the date, time, and that it had been triggered by motion detected in the frame. The location was approximately 90 miles south of Grants Pass, continuing the southern trajectory Caldwell had been tracking. Special Agent Hendricks authorized a search of the area on December 23rd. A team of 12, including FBI agents, state police, search and rescue personnel, and forensic technicians, combed the location where the photograph had been taken. They found no physical evidence, no footprints, no trace of human presence, no explanation for the rectangular light shape that had appeared in the photograph. But they did find something nearby. Approximately 40 meters from the camera location, they discovered a tree that matched Caldwell's documentation. It was there, identical to the specimens he'd photographed throughout 2019. And at its base, partially buried in loose soil and forest dew, they found an object, a small digital voice recorder, the kind journalists and researchers use for interviews. The recorder was severely weathered, its casing cracked, its battery dead. The forensics team bagged it carefully and transported it to Portland for analysis. On December 28th, technicians managed to extract data from the device's memory. It contained a single recording, 4 minutes and 37 seconds long, time-stamped October 13th, 2019. At 2:51 a.m., the audio began with silence, then rustling sounds, then Thomas Caldwell's voice, speaking in a whisper. "This is Tom Caldwell, October 13th, approximately 2:51 a.m. I'm through. I made it through. The door stayed open exactly 7 minutes, just like they said. I'm recording this in case I can't get back, in case someone finds this. The forest looks the same, but it isn't. The air is different, thicker somehow. The trees are in slightly different positions than they were on the other side. The stars are wrong. I can see constellations, but they're not right. They're close, but the angles are off by degrees." There was a long pause, heavy breathing. "Then, I can see the door from here. It's still open, but it's getting narrower. It's been about 3 minutes since I came through. I have 4 minutes left to decide. I should go back. I should go back right now, but I can see another one. Further south, maybe 100 meters through the trees. Another door, just like the first." This is what pattern_witness_03 meant. They're not just appearing randomly, they form a path. They're leading somewhere. Another pause, then sounds of movement. Footsteps on forest floor, breathing becoming more labored. "I'm going to follow them. I'm going to see where they lead. If I'm not back, if someone finds this, tell David Paulson I was right. Tell him it's all real. Tell him the pattern is." The recording ended abruptly mid-stint. The timestamp showed it had not been manually stopped, but had simply ceased, as though the device had suddenly lost power or been interrupted by some external force. Technical analysis of the audio revealed anomalies. The background sounds whined forest ambience. Even Caldwell's breathing contained frequencies slightly outside the normal range of outdoor recording. Sound engineer Melissa Park, who analyzed the file for the FBI, noted, "It's subtle, but there's a low-frequency hum underlying the entire recording, around 18 to 19 Hz, right at the edge of human hearing. This frequency doesn't occur naturally in forest environments. It's the kind of sound you'd associate with large machinery or electrical infrastructure. But there's no such infrastructure anywhere near where this recorder was found. It's almost as though the environment he was recording in was operating on a slightly different, acoustic baseline than our own." By early January 2020, the investigation had consumed thousands of hours and produced a file of evidence that, taken together, suggested something far outside the realm of normal criminal investigation. The case was officially reclassified from missing person to unexplained disappearance on January 9, 2020. The FBI maintained an open file but scaled back active investigation. Detective Moreno continued to monitor reports of unusual tree sightings and maintained contact with displaced forum members, but no new solid leads emerged. Then, on January 24, 2020, someone posted a message on the displaced forum. The username was Doxica Thomas Caldwell's account, which had been inactive since September. The post read, "Still going south. Doors are getting closer together now. Almost there. Don't follow me. The pattern doesn't go back." Forum moderators immediately contacted authorities. FBI cyber forensics traced the IP address to a public library in Ashland, Oregon, Caldwell's hometown. Security footage from the library showed no one using the computer at the time the post was made. The computer S-logs confirmed someone had logged into the forum using Caldwell's credentials at exactly 3:17 p.m., but the terminal's camera captured only an empty chair. A librarian working that shift, Margaret Peterson, told police she'd walked past that computer several times during the afternoon and had never seen anyone sitting there. "The chair was empty every time I looked," she said. "I'm certain of it." The post was the last communication anyone received that could possibly be attributed to Thomas Caldwell. The case of Thomas Caldwell remains officially unsolved as of November 2025, more than 6 years after his disappearance. No body has been found. No concrete evidence of foul play has emerged. No conventional explanation has adequately accounted for the circumstances of his vanishing or the evidence collected during the investigation. What is known with reasonable certainty: Thomas Caldwell spent at least 7 months documenting what he believed was a spatial anomaly involving a tree specimen that appeared in multiple locations throughout Oregon and Northern California. He maintained contact with at least one other individual who claimed to be investigating similar phenomena. He spent the night of October 13, 2019, in a locked storage unit that he entered but did not exit. Despite continuous security footage showing no departure, he left behind for hours of footage documenting himself waiting for something to occur, and that footage contains temporal anomalies in its internal chronometer. Some of his DNA was later found on marking tape attached to a tree in a location he had not been known to visit, at a time when he was already missing. A motion-activated camera captured an image that may show him, or someone matching his description, in a forest location 2 months after his disappearance. What remains unknown is substantially larger than what is known. The spatial anomaly Caldwell documented, if it can be called that, has not been successfully reproduced or independently verified. The recurring tree specimen has not been observed in any location since December 2019. Pattern_witness_03 has never been identified and has not communicated since September 2019. The doors Caldwell described in his audio recording have never been photographed, recorded, or witnessed by any credible source beyond that single forestry camera image, which itself admits multiple interpretations. Theories have proliferated, both official and amateur. The prevailing law enforcement theory is that Caldwell experienced some form of psychological break, staged his disappearance through methods not yet understood, and is either living off-grid under a different identity or perished in the wilderness through misadventure. The evidence of his DNA on the surveyor's tape, the audio recording, and the forestry camera image are explained as either contamination, hoaxing, or misidentification. This theory requires accepting several improbable coincidences but remains the most conventional framework. Alternative theories range from plausible to fantastical. Some researchers have suggested Caldwell discovered evidence of illegal activity in a national forest's drug cultivation, trafficking routes, or clandestine government operations and was disappeared by parties wanting to silence him. This theory struggles to explain the tree documentation and temporal anomalies. Others have proposed Caldwell was the victim of foul play by an unknown associate, possibly Pattern_witness_03, who then elaborately staged evidence to create the appearance of an inexplicable disappearance. This theory requires tremendous coordination and technical sophistication but cannot be entirely dismissed. The more unconventional theories, those discussed primarily in online forums and fringe research circles, suggest Caldwell's documentation was accurate and that he genuinely encountered some form of spatial phenomenon. These theories propose everything from quantum tunneling effects to parallel dimensions to temporally displaced topography. They remain entirely speculative and unsupported by mainstream scientific analysis. Detective Sarah Moreno, who retired from the Grants Pass Police Department in 2023, gave an interview to a regional podcast in 2024. Asked about the Caldwell case, she said, "I've worked missing persons cases for 22 years. Usually, the strange ones turn out to have mundane explanations once you dig deep enough. This one dug deeper and only got stranger. I don't know what happened to Tom Caldwell. I don't know if he's alive or dead. I don't know if what he documented was real, but I do know he believed it was real, and I know he was rigorous in his methodology. That bothers me more than anything. People who are delusional or hoaxing usually make mistakes, leave cracks you can exploit. Caldwell's documentation has no cracks. It's either the most elaborate deception I've ever encountered, or he was documenting something that shouldn't be possible. The evidence collected in the case remains in storage. The handycam, the voice recorder, the photographs, Caldwell's notebooks, his computer's all boxed and catalogued, waiting for either new evidence to provide context or for time to render the case permanently cold. The storage unit in Grants Pass was cleaned and re-rented in 2020. The tree specimens Caldwell documented, if they were indeed single organisms appearing in multiple locations, have not been reported since. One detail has never been adequately addressed by investigators, perhaps because it seems too small to matter, or perhaps because no one wants to acknowledge its implications. In Caldwell's final audio recording, made on October 13th as he allegedly stood in a forest through one of his described doors, he mentions seeing stars with incorrect angles and constellations that are close, but not right. Astronomical analysis of this statement revealed something unusual. If an observer were positioned in the same geographical location as the recorder was found within the Rogue River Siftscue National Forest but displaced approximately 200 kilometers to the south, the visible constellations would appear exactly as Caldwell described, recognizable but with angles shifted by the degrees he estimated. That southern displacement would place the observer somewhere in the northern Mexican state of Sonora, in a region of sparse desert known as El Pinique. It is an area of volcanic fields and craters, remote and rarely visited, with geography nothing like the dense forests of Oregon. On October 13, 2019, at approximately 2:51 a.m. Pacific Time, when Caldwell's voice recorder captured his final message, meteorological data shows clear skies over LP Nugget. No search of that region has ever been conducted, officially or otherwise. The connection, if it is one, has been noted by researchers but largely dismissed as coincidental or meaningless. But in March 2024, a Mexican forestry survey team working in the Sierra de San Pedro Martir, approximately 800 kilometers south of El Piniquit, continuing the southern trajectory, reported finding a cluster of old-growth Douglas fir trees in an area where such species should not exist. The tree's presence was attributed to an unknown transplantation, possibly illegal, possibly for research purposes. No follow-up investigation was conducted. The trees were documented photographically and left undisturbed. The photographs were uploaded to a botanical database. They have never been compared to Thomas Caldwell's documentation. No one has requested access to make the comparison. The files sit in separate archives, unconnected. In the final photograph Caldwell took before his disappearance, the last image on his phone taken at 10:22 p.m. on October 13, 2019, 2 hours before he entered the storage unit, he captured his own reflection in the rearview mirror of his car. He appears tired, focused, perhaps apprehensive. Behind his reflection, visible through the rear window, is a dark stretch of Interstate 5, heading south, empty of traffic, leading toward Grants Pass and whatever waited for him there. The photograph is unremarkable except for one detail noticed by forensic analysts weeks after it was taken. In the bottom corner of the frame, barely visible in the darkness beyond the car, there appears to be a tree alongside the highway. The tree's distinctive branch configuration matches specimens from Caldwell's documentation, but according to GPS data from his phone, the photograph was taken in a section of interstate where no trees grow. The area is open meadow, maintained clear for visibility and safety. The tree should not have been there. The image has never been adequately explained, like so much else in the case of Thomas Caldwell. It sits in evidence storage, unexplained, awaiting context that may never arrive. Thomas Caldwell, if he is still alive, would be 40 years old in 2025. He has been missing for 2,233 days. The pattern he spent his final documented months tracking, if it ever existed, continues without him. Or perhaps, somewhere in a forest where trees appear where they shouldn't, where doors open at predicted intervals, where constellations shift their angles by degrees. Thomas Caldwell is still going south, still documenting, still trying to prove what he found. The storage unit in Grants Pass remains empty tonight, its door closed, its lock secure. The camera that recorded his final moments has been powered off for years. The trees, wherever they are, stand silent in darkness, marking a path no one else has dared to follow. And in the evidence locker, catalogued and forgotten except by a handful of investigators who sometimes wake at night, thinking about impossible trees and doors that lead elsewhere, the voice recorder holds his final words incomplete, interrupted by something the recording could not capture. Tell him the pattern is what? Leading somewhere, real, accelerating, no one knows. The sentence remains unfinished. And Thomas Caldwell, wherever he is not there to complete it.